I entered one of the largest official Pokemon tournaments ever with a Pokemon that nobody else was using. A Pokemon thought to be so unbelievably terrible that not only was its usage as close to 0% as you can realistically ever get, not only had no other player brought it to a tournament for the entire format, but also it hasn't had a single notable result in the last 15 years. So what was I thinking? Your first thought is probably that since I'm a YouTuber, I did this for content. If this happened to be the first video of mine that you've ever watched, that would be a totally reasonable guess. But it's wrong. Because even though, yes, I do post my stupid face online every week, I'm also one of the best competitive Pokemon players in the world, if not the very best of all time. So I didn't bring this Pokemon for laughs. I brought it because not only do I believe that it was being severely underestimated, but I think that it's strong enough to win the entire tournament. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We can't start the story in the middle. Let's go back to the beginning. A few weeks before the Louisville Regional Championships. If you're from Louisville, I know that I am not pronouncing it right, and I ask for your forgiveness. Now, you may be wondering, what's a regional championship? That's a great question. Competitive Pokemon has an official circuit set up and run by the Pokemon Company. Within this circuit, there are 5 levels of events. 2 of these, now called League Challenges and League Cups, are local events. They range in size from 10 to 40 players normally and can be set up by most organizers to help foster community within their local scene. The remaining events are classified as majors. There are 3 tiers: regionals, internationals, and worlds. Worlds happens only once a year, in August, and is the absolute pinnacle of competitive Pokemon, the tournament that every player dreams of winning. Internationals are the next rung down, with only 3 events each year and players coming in from outside the region to compete for the heightened prizing and glory. And then there are regionals. These tournaments are the most common major. There will be 9 this year in North America, and while technically anyone can enter them, the vast majority of competitors are typically from the region itself. But don't let their relatively lower standing fool you. In recent times, these tournaments have become unbelievably difficult. Competitive Pokemon has exploded in popularity. Just a few years ago, these tournaments struggled to hit even 100 entrants, but at the Louisville Regional Championships, over 800 players entered in the oldest division alone. And that's the 5th biggest event that I've personally attended in the last year alone. The more players a tournament has, the more difficult it is to do well. And that's part of the reason why the Pokemon Company updated the prizing this season to make regionals far closer to internationals in terms of what you get for doing well. But prize money isn't the only thing on the line here. Players with strong performances will earn championship points, the currency you need to spend if you want to qualify for the World Championships. Qualifying is much harder this year than it has been in recent years, so I'm not taking it for granted. The way that it currently works is at the end of the season, the 75 players with the most championship points in North America will qualify for Worlds, with the exception of any player who gets top 4 at internationals or wins a regional. Accomplishing a feat like this automatically qualifies you for the World Championships. So if I can win Louisville, I will automatically qualify for Worlds. But that's not my only motivation. Like I said, regionals are really difficult to win. In fact, there's only a small handful of players who have won 2, and the drop off to players with 3 regional championships is unbelievably steep. I can count on one hand the number of players who have won 4 or more regional championships, with just one of those players having made it all the way to the title of 6-time regional champion. I have 9 regional wins. This season, I'd like to win my 10th. I set that goal after my 5th win, and even though it seemed almost unthinkable at the time, because I've won 3 regionals so far since Scarlet and Violet started, it's suddenly within reach. So now you know, I am playing seriously. But right, okay, that certainly doesn't explain how I ended up with a Pokemon with 0% usage. Well, with a few weeks until the tournament, I start working on a team with my friend Yotam. Team building is a crucial part of doing well in a tournament. While you can always take something standard, you're given a lot more creative control when you make the choices for yourself. My first thought is to build around Weezing, a Pokemon who shuts down the abilities of all other Pokemon. I had success at the Baltimore Regionals a few weeks ago using an offensive, Choice Specs Galarian Weezing, but this time I'm interested in a more supportive version of the classic form. But after a week spent trying to make it work, I give up. It's just not coming together. So I need a new starting point, but nothing's really jumping out at me. Well, okay, that's kind of a lie. There is one concept that I'm interested in. Ursaluna. Ursaluna is one of the strongest Pokemon in the game. It's got ridiculous stats, and its ability makes it 50% stronger when it's affected by a status condition, something you can guarantee by giving it the Flame Orb item. Burning Ursaluna not only makes all its moves 50% stronger, but it also doubles the power of the attack Facade, a normal type move that is powered up when the holder is affected by a status condition. Add on a few other powerful moves and good typing, and Ursaluna is one of the single best Pokemon in the format. And unsurprisingly, it's having success. But here's my issue. The way that other people are using Ursaluna, it just feels wrong to me. It's working for them, but it isn't my style. These teams are basically a bunch of support Pokemon surrounding Ursaluna with one or two other complementary offensive threats. But this puts most of the pressure on the bear to get the KOs, and leads to longer, drawn-out games that center around bringing Ursaluna in safely and keeping it healthy. This strategy can work, but it's not the way that I like to play Pokemon. If I'm gonna use Ursaluna, I want it to be just a part of a more cohesive whole. I want to be able to use it without becoming overly reliant on it. And so I need a team that has plenty of other Pokemon that can do damage. And I need to limit how many Pokemon on my team I dedicate to just support. The standard Ursaluna team features Porygon 2 to provide Trick Room for Ursaluna, Incineroar to provide Fake Out and Intimidate support, as well as Parting Shot to help get Ursaluna in safely, and Amoonguss for Disruption, Healing, and Redirection. If I'm going to make this work, I need to cut one of these three Pokemon. Porygon 2 is essential. Because Ursaluna is relatively slow, it needs help in order to attack before the opponent's Pokemon, and Porygon 2 is one of the best Trick Room setters in the game at the moment, which means I need to cut either Incineroar or Amoonguss. Incineroar, one of my least favorite Pokemon of all time, or Amoonguss, the Pokemon who clutched my last tournament win. I'm cutting Amoonguss. It is strong, but Incineroar is just too powerful. Incineroar's Intimidate ability, cutting the opponent's damage output, is a big deal. And more importantly, Incineroar has excellent synergy with both Porygon 2 and Ursaluna. See, Ursaluna's Flame Orb happens at the end of the first turn it's on the battlefield, but switching Ursaluna in is risky as you don't want it to take a ton of damage. Parting Shot not only weakens whatever it hits, but it also allows Incineroar to switch out in the middle of the turn. And if the opponent has already attacked for the turn, this means that they can't punish Ursaluna switching in. But I already knew that these three Pokemon had good synergy together. Now is the hard part. How do I take this existing concept in a new direction? Well, despite all of my Pokemon thus far working inside of Trick Room, they aren't actually that slow. In fact, all of them are at a speed tier where they could also work inside Tailwind, a 4-turn field effect that doubles the speeds of your Pokemon. But is there a Tailwind user that actually is going to work? Well, in order for Tailwind to be most effective, you need to set it up before your opponent attacks for the turn. And this is especially important if your partner Pokemon isn't fast. The reason for this is that Tailwind's speed doubling effect activates as soon as it's used. So by setting it up as the first action of the turn, your other Pokemon gets the benefits right away and can outspeed your opponent's troublesome Pokemon. But this is much easier said than done, because right now there is an extremely fast Pokemon dominating the competitive field. Dragapult. This Pokemon hits absurdly hard and is the single fastest Pokemon seeing any play. But some Pokemon can set up Tailwind even before Dragapult, because although Dragapult is fast, there are some Pokemon who move first regardless of their speed. These Pokemon, specifically Whimsicott, Talonflame, and Murkrow, and technically Volbeat and Illumise, but they're not good enough, so I'm not going to mention them here. I mean, I guess I did mention them, but whatever. They all have abilities which give Tailwind an increased stage of priority, allowing it to move before Pokemon not using priority moves, such as Dragapult. So you might be thinking that the choice for a Tailwind setter is between Whimsicott, Talonflame, and Murkrow, but I can't choose any of these Pokemon. I need every remaining Pokemon on this team to be able to do damage, since Incineroar and Porygon 2 are already taking the support Pokemon slots on my team, and all of these Tailwind setters can't do enough damage. Talonflame's attack stat is actually lower than Amoonguss's. Well, I guess this concept doesn't work. Back to the drawing board, I guess. But it just doesn't sit right with me. If there were only a way to get a good Tailwind user on this team, I feel like it could be so strong. Is there actually nothing? I scroll through every single Tailwind user over and over again, searching for some way of making it work. And then I see it. I'd missed it earlier because it isn't faster than Dragapult at first, but it turns out there is a single Tailwind setter that can outspeed Dragapult and has good enough offensive stats that it's a legitimate threat. A Pokemon with 0% usage that hasn't been used in over a decade. Yanmega. Yanmega is a bug and flying type Pokemon with a speed boost ability, giving it a speed boost at the end of every turn that it's on the field. After just one single speed boost, Yanmega outspeeds Dragapult and even some Choice Scarf Pokemon. It is the only Pokemon that can do what I need it to on this team. But why is nobody else using it? Well, to start, Yanmega's typing is a bit lackluster. Bug is one of the worst types in the game, and it doesn't have especially good synergy with flying. Yanmega also doesn't have incredible stats, especially compared to something like Fluttermane or Raging Bolt or honestly most of the newer Pokemon. And its main niche is as a Tailwind setter, and for most of the last 13 years, the best Tailwind setter has been Tornadus, who can set up Tailwind with its Prankster ability, has better typing, overall better stats, and a better move pool. But right now, in the current competitive rule set, all legendary and Paradox Pokemon are banned. No Fluttermane, no Urshifu, no Tornadus. They have literally never had a rule set like this before, and that means Pokemon that normally can't keep up suddenly have a shot. This is probably going to be Yanmega's only chance to work. I play some practice games with just these 4 Pokemon, and I'm shocked to find out how good it feels. The combination of Tailwind and Trick Room on the same team is putting opponents off balance left and right, and Yanmega's putting in absurd amounts of work. I am also able to spot some weaknesses. I add the Sneasler next. This is one of the strongest Pokemon in the format, and it works well with the other Pokemon that I already have. I want a fighting type on this team because of opposing Porygon 2 and Ursaluna, and Sneasler is the best bet because with its poison secondary typing, it's able to hit some of Ursaluna's counters like Primarina and Rillaboom. Sneasler is also fast enough that I don't need to have Tailwind up in order to let it move first, especially because I have another way of doubling its speed, but we'll get to that in a second. With just 1 Pokemon left, I need a powerful special attacker, because at present, I only have Yanmega and Porygon 2. 2 Pokemon who can be shut down if they don't have a good typing matchup. I settle on Archaludon with a rather unusual set. It's got great typing, an ability that allows it to ignore Follow Me and Rage Powder, 2 moves spiking in popularity, and a broken signature move called Electro Shot. This is a 2-turn move that only requires 1 turn in the rain, kinda like Solar Beam, except unlike Solar Beam, it also gives Archaludon a special attack boost. I don't have the rain, but I can still use Electro Shot by giving up my item slot to hold the Power Herb, which will allow me to ignore the 2-turn requirement a single time. But that 1 shot is all my Archaludon needs. By the way, these tournament videos take a ton of effort to script, edit, and produce. Not to mention all the work that goes into, actually going to and preparing for the tournament itself. If you're enjoying this video, I would love if you would check to see if you are subscribed. This is content that you can only find on this channel, so I hope you feel it's worth your while. And subscribing helps the channel and everyone who works on it. With the team complete, I spend the next few weeks refining it, obsessing over every tiny detail, every stat point. After hours spent testing and calculating different damage rolls, here's how everything ended up. Porygon 2. It's here to set Trick Room up and be extremely hard to get rid of. As a not fully evolved Pokemon, it can hold the Eviolite item, increasing both its defensive stats by a whopping 50%. And as a pure normal type Pokemon, it only has a single weakness: to fighting. Normal is actually a good type offensively for Porygon 2 as well, because it makes it a better user of Terra Blast. Terra Blast is a middling power move that turns into the Pokemon's Terra type when it terastallizes. But before then, it's a normal type move. That means Porygon 2 gets a damage boost on it even before it terastallizes, making it a viable option before terastallizing. The other neat quirk about Terra Blast is that after terastallizing, it becomes either a physical or a special move, depending on which of Porygon's attacking stats are higher. And while you might expect this to be irrelevant since Porygon 2 has more special attack than attack, it actually does matter, thanks to Porygon 2's ability. Download gives Porygon 2 either an attack or a special attack boost, depending on which defensive stat is lower on the opponent's side of the field. If the opponent's Pokemon have more special defense than defense combined, Porygon 2 gets an attack boost, and vice versa. Terra Blast means that download giving an attack boost isn't just automatically a waste. One unusual thing about my Porygon is the Terra type. The norm at the moment is to use Terra Fighting to hit Kingambit, Archaludon, Incineroar, and Ursaluna. But I really don't like how Fighting makes me weak to types like Fairy and Psychic. Instead, I'm going to use Terra Flying. This not only gives me a resistance to Fighting and a better matchup against Pokemon like Sneasler, Amoonguss, and Rillaboom, but it also makes me immune to my own Ursaluna's Earthquake. I train Porygon 2 to be fast enough to outspeed Garchomp and Palmet while Tailwind is up. And I put the remaining stat points in its bulk, which is for Actually, we'll come back to this later. Next up, Incineroar, the best Pokemon ever made. Fake Out is essential for buying time for Porygon, Ursaluna, and Yanmega. Parting Shot lets me move my Pokemon around easier, and Flare Blitz and Knockoff are its two strongest attacking moves. My team doesn't have a grass type, so I'll use Safety Goggles to help give me an Amoonguss immunity. Terra Ghost can make Incineroar immune to both fighting attacks and opposing Fake Out users, providing a lot of utility. Incineroar is trained to outspeed Sneasler and Adamant Dragapult in Tailwind. This is, truthfully, one of the most bizarre EV spreads I have ever used. So much special defense, not even max HP, and 0 defense? There's no way that this is optimal, right? So, why did I do it? Well, we'll come back to it later, I promise. Ursaluna, you already understand the moves, ability, and item. Some players are choosing to drop Earthquake for Swords Dance, Shadow Claw, or Substitute, but I think Earthquake is broken, so I'm gonna use it. Lots of players are now running Terra Normal on Ursaluna to get a damage boost, but I want to get maximum value out of my speed control turns, so I'm gonna use Terra Ghost to prevent Fake Out from slowing me down. Ursaluna almost always runs maximum attack investment, but mine is a good bit weaker. This is because I want those stat points to do other things. I want Ursaluna to always outspeed Annihilate and Goldengo in Tailwind, and to survive Kingambit's Sucker Punch. Well, okay, not just a regular Sucker Punch. I want Ursaluna to survive a +2 Swords Dance boosted, Black Glasses boosted, Terra Dark boosted Sucker Punch, and 1 turn of burn damage. This is an absurdly powerful move, but by putting all these stat points in, I can do it. Next, Yanmega. Bzzz. Detect is used over Protect in case I play against an imprisoned Pokemon, and Bug Buzz and Air Slash are its two strongest moves that match its typing. Air Slash isn't a very strong move, but after using this team, I realize that it's completely broken because it flinches whatever it hits 30% of the time. On a Pokemon like Yanmega, who is almost always moving first, this is completely overpowered. Yanmega also uses Terra Ghost for the Fake Out immunity, plus it helps against Dragonite Extreme Speed. Focus Sash is one of the best items in the game, as it ensures Yanmega can always take one big attack, and forces opponents to spend 2 different moves at least if they want to get rid of the bug, assuming that they aren't getting flinched by Air Slash. Yanmega has maximum special attack, enough speed to outspeed Choice Scarf Basculegion after a speed boost, and a few points in its defense to increase the odds that Choice Band Dragapult Dragon Darts won't be able to KO Yanmega with just 2 hits. Sneasler's actually deviating quite a bit from the normal way that people use it. The default set is to run max speed, max attack, and a Focus Sash, but I can't do that because I'm using the Focus Sash elsewhere. Most Sneasler use Fake Out, and more still use Coaching, but I'm using neither. Nearly every Sneasler runs Close Combat and Dire Claw at least, since they're its strongest moves. Dire Claw in particular is terrifying, as it has a 50% chance of inflicting a poison, paralysis, or sleep. Why am I not using the regular moves? Well, I think that my Sneasler needs Protect, as neither Porygon 2 or Incineroar has it, and because Yanmega often needs to Protect on the first turn in order to get the speed boost. Without Protect, this would make my Sneasler a sitting duck. But why do I have Throat Chop? Well, it's not a very strong move, but Sneasler needs Throat Chop in order to at least do some damage to opposing Goldengo. Neither Porygon 2 or Yanmega can easily damage Goldengo, so it's pretty important that Sneasler can hit it. I did try a few defensive Terra types on Sneasler, but in the end, I settled on Stellar to boost its damage. There's a lot of Pokemon in the format that just barely survive its moves, and Stellar can let you get them in just 1 attack. Of course, the real strange part of my Sneasler is the item, ability, and stats. With the Focus Sash taken, I need another item, and eventually I settle on White Herb. This item restores Sneasler's lowered stats a single time. It can be used to stop Incineroar's Intimidate, or to remove the defense drops from close combat. And when White Herb is used up, it activates Sneasler's Unburden ability, doubling its speed stat. With Unburden active, Sneasler can even outspeed opposing Pokemon in Tailwind, even when Yanmega isn't around. But because I'm not using the Focus Sash, Sneasler needs some help staying alive. I decide to lower Sneasler's attack dramatically and invest the stat points in its bulk instead. Sneasler already has decent special bulk, so I focus most of my points in its defense and HP stats. This Sneasler is trained to survive that same Kingambit +2 Terra Dark Black Glasses Sucker Punch attack. Despite it being a resisted hit, this move can KO a Sneasler that doesn't have bulk. It's just that powerful. Lastly, Archaludon. This Hulk bulking Metal Bridge is a bit different on my team compared to the norm. First, I have Thunderbolt instead of Flash Cannon. I need Archaludon to hit Primarina and King Gambit, and since I can only reliably use Electro Shot once, if they bait the move out and get me to waste it, then suddenly, if it doesn't have Thunderbolt, Archaludon can't do much against either. Second, the Terra type. Electric doesn't really offer any defensive value here, but since I have two different electric type attacks, I can use it as an offensive Terra instead. Third, the ability. Most Archaludon use the Sturdy ability if they want the Power Herb, but Follow Me has picked up a ton in usage, and being able to ignore it is massive, especially given how strong Terra Electric Electro Shot is. And lastly, the stats. This Archaludon is significantly more bulky than the typical Power Herb sets. I've sacrificed both speed and power in order to get the bulk, though I am still strong enough to get important KOs. With the bulk, I've trained Archaludon to survive that same King Gambit Sucker Punch attack, while maintaining enough speed to outspeed Modest Pelipper, as well as some other key threats inside of Tailwind. That's all of the Pokemon, but those of you who are paying a lot of attention probably noticed that something is missing. I haven't explained Porygon 2 or Incineroar's EV spreads yet. The reason is that these EV spreads don't actually do anything specific. They aren't trained to survive one particular attack or even a combination of attacks. These spreads instead only make sense in the context of the team as a whole. Remember Porygon 2's download ability? How it chooses which boost to give depending on which of the opponent's defensive stats is lower? Well, that's true of other Porygon 2 as well. And you know how my Trick Room Pokemon all have some speed EVs in order to make sure that they move first in Tailwind? Well, other Porygon 2 teams don't bother with Tailwind, giving them the advantage in Trick Room. And remember how I said the default Terra type on Porygon 2 was Fighting? Well, 4 of my Pokemon are weak to Fighting. If I let opposing Porygon 2 get the special attack boost, it's really dangerous. None of my Pokemon can KO it in one hit, and it can output consistent damage while also keeping itself healthy with Recover. It's beatable, but it becomes much harder. And frankly, I don't want to deal with it. So I make a decision. I'm going to run suboptimal EV spreads on both Incineroar and Porygon 2 in order to make sure that I can deny opposing Porygon 2 the download special attack boost. The way that this works is that I looked at the biggest gap between defense and special defense on my team, excluding Archaludon, who has too large of a difference to ever deny download. That's Ursaluna, whose defense stat is 35 points higher than its special defense stat. So to compensate for this, I make both Incineroar and Porygon 2's special defense stats 36 points higher than their defense stats. What this means is that, assuming that Archaludon is not on the field, if I have either Porygon 2 or Incineroar out, opposing Porygon 2 are always stuck getting the attack boost. And since both Incineroar and Porygon 2 are so tanky, it's relatively easy to make sure that I always have one of them out when their Porygon 2 could switch in. If you want to use this team for yourself, you can try it out with the rental code here. And if you want instant access to all my tournament teams and 3 bonus videos a month, you should check out my Patreon. I post a ton of extra content there every month, so if you're interested in learning more about competitive play, or you just want more Wolfey content, it's the place to be. The tournament itself is split into 3 phases. To make it past the first phase, I need to win at least 6 of my 8 rounds. To make it past the second phase, I need to win 9 of my first 11 rounds. And the final phase is Top Cut, a single elimination bracket. If I make it there, a single loss means I'm out. I hop on the plane to Louisville, grab dinner with Yotom, and head to bed. The next morning, we head to the venue, and as round 1 starts, I'm surprised to see familiar faces on my opponent's team. Toadscruel and Wheezing? Alrighty, guess who has 3 thumbs and got a haircut? Surprise, these videos take quite a while to make. My opponent has a modified version of my Baltimore concept, with Palafin, Incineroar, Kilowattrel, and Dragapult rounding out the core. The good news is that I'm familiar with this team and a lot of the weird mechanics surrounding Wheezing. The bad news is that a lot of my Pokemon really want their abilities. Yanmega only outspeeds Dragapult after a speed boost. Ursaluna's Guts ability is really important when it comes to not only powering it up, but ignoring the attack having nature of burn, and Incineroar, Porygon 2, and Sneasler all kind of want to use their abilities in this matchup. But in the first game, my opponent doesn't bring either Wheezing or Toadscruel. Instead, they go with a game plan centered around the other 4 Pokemon, starting off with Palafin and Incineroar against my Archaludon and Sneasler. Their Intimidate activates my White Herb, doubling Sneasler's speed and allowing it to outspeed everything. I'm applying so much offensive pressure already with both my Pokemon threatening KOs that my Sneasler and Archaludon are able able to nearly win the game on their own, and Porygon 2 just has to do a little cleanup in the end. The second game, they start with one of the stars, Weezing, and ability shield Incineroar. But after protecting both my Pokemon turn 1, I'm once again in control. Obviously, I am very familiar with Weezing, which is how I know that Terra Electric Electroshot can KO it in one hit. They switch Incineroar to Toedscruel, who takes a ton from close combat, and Archaludon just KOs Weezing. From here, I'm nearly able to finish the game with just Archaludon and Sneasler, and Porygon 2 can come in at the end to just tap in the victory. 1 win, 0 losses. Round 2 goes up, and my opponent's team is a style reminiscent of competitive play back in the early 2010s. This is a Trick Room team, but it's a little bit unusual for modern standards. Nowadays, because the Pokemon have become so powerful, teams that are built around the Trick Room strategy tend to go all in on offense. But back in the day when I first started playing, Trick Room teams didn't have support Pokemon like Indeedee or offensive Pokemon like Ursaluna, so they tended to be a lot bulkier. Actually, fun fact, my first season playing competitively, I actually used a bulky Trick Room team for the entire year. This round 2 matchup reminds me of those teams. Chandelure and Porygon 2 to set Trick Room up, Amoonguss for support, and Ursaluna, Primarina, and Kingambit as potential sweepers. The battle begins with Amoonguss and Chandelure against my Incineroar and Ursaluna. I protect Ursaluna as their Amoonguss switches to Primarina, and I knock off Chandelure as it sets up Trick Room. But Ursaluna is naturally slower than Primarina and will KO with Facade. So I decide to just attack with both my Pokemon even though Trick Room is up. They switch Primarina back to Amoonguss, realizing the same thing, and launch a Heat Wave that hits both my Pokemon. But I pick up a double KO with Facade hitting the switched in Amoonguss and knocking out the Chandelure. With just 3 turns left of Trick Room and all 4 Pokemon still left, I'm able to win by baiting my opponent into terastallizing and then closing out the game with Sneasler and Ursaluna. And I got a lot of really valuable information. Because my Ursaluna is kind of fast, their Primarina is actually slower than it. Actually, every Pokemon that I saw was slower than my slowest Pokemon. I realized that if I can just deny the Trick Room, I'll have the speed advantage for the entire battle. Game 2 starts with their Amoonguss and Chandelure lead against my Archaludon and Incineroar. Normally, Amoonguss could use Rage Powder to ensure Trick Room goes up, but Incineroar isn't affected by Rage Powder thanks to its safety goggles, and Archaludon has Stalwart, which ignores all redirection. Of course, doubling into Chandelure is risky. It does have Protect, and if they go for it and Spore Archaludon, I'll be so far behind after the first turn that I might not even be able to recover with incredible plays. But I decide to risk it anyway. They Protect Amoonguss. I double into Chandelure, and it goes down. Ursaluna comes in, and they're forced to terastallize Amoonguss to Dark to survive my double attack. But now, their Amoonguss is weak to Sneasler. I spread damage across the board and bring it in, and with their last Pokemon being Kingambit, Sneasler can easily clean up with some help from Ursaluna. I win the game and the set, 2 wins, 0 losses. In the third round, I'm paired against a Rain team with Maushold and Annihilape. Maushold has weak moves that can damage its partner Pokemon. It can use Beat Up on Annihilape, powering up its Rage Fist attack to do 5 times the initial damage. But it can also use Population Bomb on Archaludon, activating its stamina ability for every time it gets hit, resulting in up to quadruple its starting defense stat, which is already quite high. For my team, the Archaludon is a much bigger threat than the Annihilape, and I can't easily stop Maushold, so my plan has to be to get rid of the Archaludon. Game 1, they lead with the Mouse and the Bridge, and get the setup going right away. I focus on using Yanmega to pressure down Maushold and Sneasler to get damage on Archaludon, but to my shock, close combat does way less than I expect. It seems that, rather than training this Archaludon to be strong offensively, which is the norm, it's been trained almost entirely in its bulk. And so my normal plan of chipping it down with multiple powerful attacks isn't adding up to a KO like it did when I practiced this matchup. I might still be able to win, but then their Pelipper outspeeds my Archaludon. This only happens if they're running a speed boosting nature rather than a special attack boosting one, which again isn't really the norm, but pretty much just wins them game 1 on the spot. In game 2, I decide to focus down their Archaludon with my own Terra Electric Archaludon. It's not a perfect strategy, but by using Terra Electric Electroshot, I can deal a fair bit of damage, get a special attack boost, and survive the body press, despite them being maximally defense boosted. Yanmega dodges a crucial Population Bomb the next turn and sets Tailwind up, letting me KO their Archaludon without fear of Follow Me, thanks to Stalwart. Pelipper comes in and I predict the Maushold to Protect, and I double Pelipper for the KO. Now up 4 against 2, I win game 2, but I don't know if that's going to work again for game 3. If Mousehold had connected that population bomb, I might have been in some trouble. The Archaludon is giving me a huge headache, but that's mainly because it keeps boosting its defense. The Mousehold doesn't have Terra Ghost, so I decide to switch things up and go with my Trick Room mode for game 3. I lead off with an Incineroar and Porygon 2 against their Archaludon and Mousehold. Fake Out lets Trick Room go up, and Archaludon uses Body Press against Porygon. I double into the Mousehold as it switches to Pelipper and get the KO, but Archaludon uses Electro Shot to boost its special attack. I may have focused a little bit too much on its defense stat when Archaludon has another way of getting stronger. The battle gets pretty dicey from here. I'm eventually able to trade my Incineroar for their Basculegion, but I let my other Pokemon take a ton of damage in the process. In the end, it comes down to Porygon 2 and Ursaluna against Mousehold and Archaludon, with Tailwind up as a parting gift from Yanmega. I Terrastallize Ursaluna to Ghost, becoming immune to the Population Bomb, and get a double KO with Earthquake, winning me the game. 3 wins, 0 losses. All right, that was actually kind of tough. I don't think I realized going into this tournament how bad a combination Archaludon and Mousehold could be. And that's a problem because my next opponent has it as well. And it's going to be on stream. To make matters worse, there's technical difficulties. My opponent and I end up being stuck on stage, waiting to start for close to 30 minutes. After what feels like forever, I check my phone and I see that Yotom has already actually won his match while I haven't even started. The other players in the tournament could use this extra time to get lunch or just take a break, while we were stuck waiting to play. But eventually, everything gets sorted out and we can finally start. But the matchup is really, really tough. It's the same Mousehold, Annihilate, and Archaludon setup with Pelipper for Rain, but it also features Sinistcha, a Pokemon that can heal its partners every time it switches in and has one of the best matchups against Ursaluna, and they also have Klefki. The main advantage of Klefki is that it's immune to Dire Claw. So while I did practice this matchup, them having Klefki changes things a lot because my plan to get rid of the Reflect and Light Screen user typically was just to use Dire Claw on the Grimmsnarl. My general plan in this matchup is to try and KO all of Archaludon's partners first and then just beat it in the end, since trying to whittle away at it doesn't really work with Sinistcha healing it back up at all points in the battle. The battle starts and Mousehold immediately sets up Archaludon. Though this one doesn't have Population Bomb, so Archaludon only ends up with 3 times the defense, not 4. Wow, how great. I double Mousehold to take it out as Archaludon takes half of Sneasler's HP. All in all, not a bad turn 1. Klefki comes out and sets up Reflect as I double into it, but Air Slash misses. It's 95% accurate, but unfortunately, that's a number that's not 100%. The good news is there is a little luck on my side as Sneasler survives a second Flash Cannon. Klefki sets up the Misty Terrain next turn, which cuts the damage of Dragon-type moves in half, but more importantly, will prevent my Ursaluna from burning itself. I double Klefki for a KO as Snarl finishes off Sneasler, breaks Yanmega's Focus Sash, and drops Yanmega's special attack. I send out my Archaludon as my opponent goes into Sinistcha. I need to get rid of Sinistcha and then try and beat Archaludon with Ursaluna. So I Terrastallize to Electric and launch Air Slash and Terra Electric Electro Shot into the teacup. The Terra makes Electro Shot stronger than Dragon Pulse, and it also means that I don't go down to a single Body Press. Archaludon takes under half from Body Press and Sinistcha flinches, denying the life due healing. Now I can double the Sinistcha for the KO, but I mess up. Air Slash and Thunderbolt covers for both Terra and not Terra, but my brain completely forgets that Sinistcha is Terra Fairy, and it also forgets about Misty Terrain. So I go Bug Buzz and Dragon Pulse and get completely shut out by the Terra Fairy. This lets Archaludon get a Snarl off, lowering Yanmega's special attack even further, and Sinistcha heals itself up with Life Dew. I rectify my mistake with the proper moves the next turn, but Archaludon KOs my Yanmega. So now I have -1 Archaludon and Ursaluna against an Assault Vest Archaludon with 4 stages of increased defense. I use Electro Shot. Even though I've already burned the Power Herb, I still feel like this is worth it. I think Ursaluna can probably take a Body Press right now, and I don't want to give them another defense boost. And my instinct is correct. I do survive the Body Press, but without the burn, Headlong Rush doesn't do nearly any damage. Electro Shock comes out, but their Archaludon is probably still not in range of Dragon Pulse. They go for Snarl and miss Ursaluna. It's only 95% accurate, just like Air Slash. Headlong Rush doesn't KO, but it does put them in range of Dragon Pulse. Somehow, I win game 1, but this set is far from over. Game 2 begins with the same leads from both of us. In game 1, I covered for Mousehold using Terra Ghost, but they didn't bother. So this time, I'm gonna risk a close combat. Mousehold gets Archaludon set up once again, but it doesn't Terra, and Sneasler takes it out in a single attack. This time Air Slash connects with the Archaludon and gets the flinch. This battle's a race to see whether or not their Archaludon can do enough damage to all of my Pokemon before I KO all of Archaludon's partners, and buying even a single attack is really valuable. My opponent sends out Sinistcha, but I think that this is a bait. Sinistcha's kind of a sitting duck here to Air Slash and Throat Chop or Dire Claw, so I think my opponent really has only sent it out to get me to use a move that isn't close combat as he switches in Klefki to try and buy himself a turn to attack with Archaludon. It's a little bit spooky, but I'm going to predict the switch.
Close combat though, straight into the Sinistcha slot.
Klefki now has to choose between Reflect, Light Screen, and Misty Terrain. And I figure I can actually save Sneasler here if I want, since Yanmega can KO Klefki. I switch Sneasler into Incineroar, but to my surprise, Klefki chooses Light Screen and survives the Air Slash. Though at least Archaludon doesn't do that much damage to Incineroar. This was a mistake though. I needed to get rid of Klefki this turn to force Sinistcha in. Klefki gets Reflect up as I terrestrialize Incineroar to Ghost to make it immune to Body Press, and Yanmega finishes off Klefki as a parting shot to bring my Sneasler back in. Sinistcha is forced out. I double Sinistcha with Air Slash and Dire Claw. With the screens up, it only does 50%, but either a flinch or a status condition would be huge. I get neither. Sinistcha eats the Citrus Berry and uses Life Dew to go back to almost full HP. I send Incineroar back out as they KO Yanmega with Snarl. I double Sinistcha again, but again, no status condition, and it survives the double up. This is all because I let Klefki get that second screen. If it weren't for Reflect, Sinistcha would be long gone. Sneasler survives, but gets burnt. And now I don't have the juice left in the tank to win this game. Sneasler getting burnt puts a timer on it, and so I can't just stall at the Light Screen, which was my original plan. I need one more turn to remove Assault Vest and stall the last turn of Light Screen, but I fail the double protect and lose the game. But I do see a way to win game 3. Incineroar with Ghost Terra is really good here. It's immune to Body Press, and I can use Knockoff on Archaludon to remove the Assault Vest. Plus, their Archaludon can't protect already. That makes Fake Out actually a pretty scary move if I can position it correctly. I didn't really want to lead with Incineroar because I've been afraid of Annihilate, but at this point, I'm pretty sure my opponent doesn't feel like they need to bring the Ape. I'm going to do Incineroar and Sneasler lead, and my instincts were correct. My opponent sticks with the same leads they've been using all set. Now, I have an incredibly safe play. Close Combat the Mouse Hold and Terra Ghost knock off the Mouse Hold. If they do Terrestrialize to Ghost, they still take a ton of damage, and neither of my Pokemon gets KO'd in even 2 hits here. But then I think, do I actually need to Terrestrialize Incineroar? I mean, it's so obvious I'm going to do it. Surely he's not going to Body Press into a potential Ghost Terra. I decide to play greedy. The turn starts and Mousehold terrestrializes to Ghost and uses Beat Up to set up Archaludon. Close Combat does 0 damage, and Archaludon Body Presses Incineroar for the 1-hit KO. An enormous blunder by me, completely ignoring my safe play and taking a needless risk for actually no reason. I just threw this game away on the first turn. But it's against my nature to give up, so I'm still going to find a way to do this, though realistically this shouldn't be possible. I go into Archaludon and use Electro Shot to KO Mousehold as they snarl to lower my special attack back down to neutral. Sinistcha comes out, and it can use Rage Powder to redirect my Close Combat into its Ghost typing. But the only way I'm going to win this game is if I get a read right. Sinistcha switches out into Klefki, but I ignore it and launch Close Combat and Dragon Pulse into Archaludon as it snarls again. Sinistcha comes back out to heal Archaludon as I double it again, and it KOs my Sneasler. Will another Dragon Pulse pick up the KO? Sinistcha uses Rage Powder, taking the Air Slash, but Dragon Pulse ignores it thanks to Stalwart, and leaves their Archaludon with just 10 HP. Sinistcha switches to Klefki, and I finally KO Archaludon. It's down to a 2 against 2, and I mess up. I try to cover for Air Slash missing by doubling into Sinistcha, but this opens myself up to Dazzling Gleam, critical hitting Yanmega for the KO, something that I hadn't considered. I probably should have just risked the Air Slash miss, but now it'll come down to whether or not Archaludon can land a Thunderbolt critical hit. I've got 2 shots. The first one,
the 2 snarls after the 1 Electro Shot. These now same type attack bonus Thunderbolt coming through into Klefki doesn't
crit. And the second one fails as well. I lose game 3. 3 wins and 1 loss in the tournament. And because of all the delays, I don't get a break before being thrown immediately back into the next round. And it's against Dondozo. Dondozo is really scary, but I do have a game plan and some really good tools to stop the fish. The battle starts with their Goldango and Murkrow against my Archaludon and Yanmega. I KO Goldango turn 1 as they launch a Shadow Ball into Archaludon. They're forced to go into Dondozo. They tear it to Poison and haze away my boosts, but Thunderbolt does 40% to Dondozo, and Archaludon survives the Earthquake thanks to all the bulk that I'm running. Murkrow goes into Tatsugiri, but this this Dondozo's already kind of low. I double it with Air Slash and Thunderbolt, and Dondozo fires back with Wave Crash, KOing Yanmega. But then it faints to the recoil. Tatsugiri goes down to Fake Out and Dragon Pulse, and I finish off the Murkrow easily. Game 2 is pretty sad for Dondozo. I forced Dondozo to combine early, but because they don't have order up, all the attack drops I can land are permanent. I used Porygon 2 and Incineroar to lower Dondozo's attack 3 times, and gradually chip away at it with Porygon 2 and Yanmega. I let Trick Room expire only to set it up again, then KO both Dondozo and Tatsugiri in the same turn with a double attack. With just 2 Pokemon left in Trick Room, I closed the game out quickly. 4 wins, 1 loss. But things aren't getting any easier. My next opponent has a truly bizarre team. Toxtricity, Komao, Indeedee Male, Drifblim? What? Gholdengo and Amoonguss are the only Pokemon I've fought so far this tournament. Okay, I really don't know what this team wants to do, but as far as I can tell, it seems pretty weak if I can just get Trick Room up. I'll start with Incineroar and Yanmega to try and get rid of the Indeedee, and then focus on getting the Trick Room up so I can win. They lead with Indeedee and Komao, and immediately terrestrialize Komao to fire to get away from the flying weakness. Air Slash connects and lands a critical hit, and Komao sets up an Iron Defense. Incineroar uses Knock Off to bring Indeedee down to Focus Sash, and Indeedee goes for Trick Room? Huh, they set it up for me. I mean, I think that's fine. I KO Indeedee with Incineroar as they KO Incineroar with Body Press, and another Air Slash brings Komao down to red HP. I send out Ursaluna, they send out Gholdengo. Komao protects, and Gholdengo survives the Earthquake and goes for Make It Rain, doing a lot of damage to both of my Pokemon. And Yanmega Bug Buzz doesn't finish off the Gholdengo, which is actually good. They go for a double protect and fail, and Earthquake KOs both. With just Amoonguss left, I win game 1. I want to do the same overall game plan for game 2, but I think I can switch up my leads. I realize I can use Yanmega and Porygon 2 to force them into an awkward spot. If they use Imprison, they stop Trick Room, but they can't KO Yanmega. And if they Expanding Force, they can bring Yanmega to Sash, but not deny the Trick Room. Their leads are the same. I use Bug Buzz to bring them down to Sash as they Imprison, and Komao sets up an Iron Defense and terrestrializes to fire. And Porygon 2 fails the Trick Room. But now I realize, do I even need to Trick Room? I could just use Tailwind to get a speed advantage, I think. I terrestrialize to Flying to save Porygon 2 from a potential Body Press, and KO Indeedee with Ice Beam as Komao sets up a second Iron Defense. Drifblim comes out. They set Tailwind up, but not before Yanmega uses Air Slash into Komao, who flinches. Porygon 2's Terra Blast does a ton to Komao, leaving it with red HP. Komao protects itself from Air Slash, but now they've taken the bait and set Tailwind up, so I can set Trick Room. Porygon 2 is now once again the fastest Pokemon. I KO Komao and bring in Incineroar, and they reveal their last Pokemon to be Gholdengo. They have no way of beating Incineroar with 2 Ghost types left. And I close out the game. 5 wins and 1 loss. If I win one more game, I qualify for tomorrow. But unfortunately, I can't tell you about my round 7 match because I don't have any notes. And I didn't take any notes because honestly, I was kind of mad about what happened. In the penultimate round of the day, I'm paired against my friend Yotom, the friend who I built this team with. This was an exact mirror match, with both of us having the exact same Pokemon, items, Terra types, EV spreads, etc. These matches are always silly, though at least with this team there are multiple different modes, so we each ended up bringing different Pokemon to the battle. In the end, I'm able to win because I call out how Yotom's going to protect his Ursaluna, but honestly, it's a mirror match, so it really could have gone either way, which means that I've qualified for day 2 of this tournament. But I can't take my foot off the gas. Every win still counts. Currently, I have 6 out of 7, and I need 9 out of 11 to make top cut. My last match of the day is against one of the main teams that came out of Baltimore, Porygon 2, Ursaluna, and Flamigo. This is actually the standard Ursaluna team that I wanted to deviate from when I went about building this team. The battle starts with their Flamigo and Incineroar against my Yanmega and Incineroar. Flamigo is actually a big threat. I have 4 fighting weaknesses, I can't intimidate Flamigo because of its scrappy ability, and I also can't become immune to fighting with Terra Ghost for the same reason. Though, about that. Turn 1 of the battle is a wash. I fake out into Incineroar and they protect Flamigo. But turn 2, I go for Terra Ghost with Incin, in part because I forgot about Scrappy. Whoops. but also because I realized that if they have Ursaluna in the back, I can't afford to lose Incineroar just yet. I Air Slash Flamigo down to its Focus Sash and parting shot their Incineroar to bring out my Ursaluna. As they Flare Blitz my Yanmega, I Tailwind and Facade to KO their Incineroar, and Ursaluna survives the close combat. They send out their Ursaluna. I KO Flamigo with Bug Buzz as they protect Ursaluna and send out Amoonguss, but this Amoonguss can't protect. They Terastallize to Water, but I double it with Bug Buzz and Facade for the guaranteed KO. And even though they in turn knock out my Yanmega, I'm up 3-1 and I still have Incineroar left. I win game 1. I bring the same leads again in game 2, but they switch to Porygon 2 and Incineroar. And thanks to my EVs, this means that Download gives an attack boost. I switch on Mega into Sneasler and fake out Porygon 2 as they knock off Sneasler on the switch, trying to catch my Ursaluna coming in. Porygon 2 Terastallizes to Fighting, but I ignore it, instead using Close Combat on Incineroar, who survives? Huh? I parting shot their Porygon 2 and bring in Ursaluna, as they Flare Blitz Sneasler, who survives thanks to the bulk, and Incineroar goes down to the recoil as Porygon 2 sets up Trick Room. They send out Ursaluna. Now, their Ursaluna could protect, but I don't think that it's gonna. I switch Sneasler to Incineroar and Terastallize my Ursaluna to Ghost. Facade does almost nothing to my Incineroar, and my Ursaluna is immune to their Terra Blast. And Facade hits the Ursaluna and drop it low. I fake it out the next turn and Facade Porygon 2 for 70%. And with a little bit of extra damage from Fake Out plus the burn damage, their Ursaluna is one turn away from fainting to burn. I protect, Ursaluna goes down, and with just Porygon 2 and Amoonguss left against Ursaluna, Incineroar, Yanmega, and Sneasler, I close out the game. Final record for the day is 7 wins and 1 loss. I head to dinner with my friends, then get back to the hotel with plenty of time to shower and sleep. The next day, I text my friend Carson to ask if he can grab me a banana from his hotel, since the hotel that I'm at is charging $6 per banana, and the hotel that he's at gives away bananas for free. Then I head over to the venue to start the tournament. My round 1 opponent is Carson. He went undefeated yesterday, whereas I lost a game, so I didn't think that we'd be playing this early. He gave me my banana. Though we did joke about him holding it for ransom. And with my stomach now full of potassium, we jump into the battle. Carson, in my eyes, is the Dondozo expert. He's used it for the vast majority of Scarlet and Violet, even in formats where it wasn't considered to be a main threat. And in this format, Dondozo is quite strong. My team does have a pretty decent Dondozo matchup, but I have a problem. Carson has the combination of Indeedee Male and Sneasler with Psychic Seed. Indeedee's Psychic Surge activates the Psychic Seed, giving Sneasler a special defense boost and triggering Unburden, doubling Sneasler's speed stat. This means Yanmega needs 3 speed boosts to outspeed it rather than the usual 1. That being said, I do have a plan. I can use Yanmega and Sneasler to outspeed Indeedee and KO it. With Indeedee down, Carson will be forced into Dondozo early, and I'll still have all of my Pokemon left. This Dondozo also can't boost its attack, so once I've forced it in, I can use Incineroar and Porygon 2 to weaken it, and then finish the game with Porygon 2 and whatever I have left. And the game starts as I hope, Indeedee and Sneasler against my Sneasler and Yanmega. I predict both my Pokemon to get the speed boost. Now all I need is to KO Indeedee. But Carson launches a Dire Claw and rolls Paralysis. And suddenly, Yanmega no longer outspeeds, and Expanding Force KOs both of my Pokemon. I do eventually KO both of Carson's Pokemon, but I can no longer beat Dondozo. I lose game 1. Okay, so there are 2 ways of approaching a game 2. I can either hope that he just doesn't roll the 1 in 3 chance of getting Paralysis or Sleep on a Dire Claw, or I can try a new strategy to try and make it not come down to luck at all. I decide to go with the latter. I don't love gambling on luck, and especially at the start of the day, it just feels like it's gonna set a bad precedent for me. Even if the odds are heavily in my favor, I'd rather try and find a way that makes the odds as close to 100% as I can get them. The leads in game 2 are the same, but this time I try something different. I switch Sneasler to Incineroar and Detect with Yanmega. Dire Claw hits Yanmega's Protect, and Expanding Force does nothing to Incineroar. Turn 2, Carson doubles Yanmega and I KO Indeedee. I send out Sneasler, he sends out Dondozo. Now, Carson could switch into Tatsugiri here, but I don't think he's gonna. I ignore the Dondozo and double Sneasler as he throat chops my Ghost Terra on Incineroar, losing Sneasler in the process. But even though I'm up 3 against 2, I don't have the juice left in the tank to beat this Dondozo. Part of the issue here is that I'm just not as familiar with my damage calcs as I would like to be. I'm pretty sure that my Ghost Terra Incineroar can survive a Wave Crash from no attack boost Dondozo, since I still have half my HP left, but that was just wrong. And because I lose Incineroar, Porygon 2 can never beat the leftover Steel Terra Dondozo. I lose game 2, putting me at a record of 7 wins and 2 losses. But but honestly, I don't feel that bad about it. Carson is a strong player, and even though I lost, I really like my decision to try to adapt in game 2. It didn't work, and upon reflection, it was never gonna work, but that's not because the plan was so bad, it's really just because I didn't know how much damage Dondozo did. I guess what I'm trying to say is that even though I did lose, I think that if I'd made the decision to try and gamble on Dire Claw and just been like, I hope it doesn't get the status condition, that actually would have been a worse sign for the day overall, even if I had ended up winning the set. But the problem is, because I lost, if I want to make it to the top cut, I have to win both of my remaining matches. Round 10 is against a team with more standard Pokemon: Sneasler, Rillaboom, Clefable, Goldengo, Dragonite, and Kingambit. My notes for the set are a little lackluster. In game 1, I KO Goldengo early and bring Sneasler down to Focus Sash, but I miss an Air Slash, which makes things really dicey. I end up with a really big lead, but my opponent hard reads me turn after turn, ignoring my protects and doubling the partner, using high horsepower into Yanmega as it switches to Incineroar, and more. Despite all of it, I still end up winning, because my lead and my matchup advantage were just too good. Game 2 starts with me losing both my Terra and my Archaludon on turn 1. I took an unnecessary risk and was punished super hard. Thankfully, Yanmega brings me back into the game by landing a huge critical hit on turn 2 that KOs their Sneasler as it terrestrializes to Ghost, keeping me in the game. Once again, I end up in a position where my matchup advantage is just too big, and I'm able to convert it into a win. I just have to win this next round, and I'll make it into top cut. But the team I'm paired up against is terrifying. It's got Archaludon and Pelipper, but also Porygon 2, Ursaluna, Amoonguss, and Incineroar. The issue is that against Archaludon and Pelipper, I want to use my own Archaludon, but that's the one Pokemon I don't want to bring against Porygon 2 because it'll give them the download special attack boost. In game 1, I fall behind early, but I get their Amoonguss to terrestrialize to water in order to land a Spore. They brought Amoonguss, Incineroar, Pelipper, and Archaludon, and with a water type Amoonguss and the rain up, my Archaludon becomes a monster. I get multiple Electro Shots off, and there's nothing they can do to stop the bridge. But game 2, they leave Pelipper behind, bringing Amoonguss, Incineroar, Ursaluna, and Archaludon. And although it is narrow, I just barely lose. I switched Ursaluna into a knockoff and lost the Flame Orb, and that made it really difficult to get back into the game. Whether or not I stay in this tournament all depends on game 3. I haven't wanted to lead with Ursaluna because they have Pelipper, but after how game 1 went, I don't think they're gonna bring Pelipper because it just ended up turning my Archaludon into this unstoppable, hulking massive bridge. I lead with Ursaluna and Yanmega, and am greeted with Incineroar and Amoonguss. This time, I can safely protect to get my Flame Orb, and I use the offense granted by Ursaluna to tear through my opponent's team. I finished the day 2 portion of Swiss with a final record of 9 wins and 2 losses, which means I'm advancing into top cut. At this point, losing a set means you're out of the tournament. Some players with the best records get to skip straight to the round of top 16, but because I lost twice already in the tournament, I'll need to play an extra play-in round if I want to make it there. And my opponent's team is weird and terrifying. It's got some familiar faces: Dragapult, Porygon 2, Ursaluna, and Rillaboom, but it also has Empoleon and Blaziken. Just like Yanmega, Blaziken also has speed boost, and Empoleon completely walls Porygon 2 and Yanmega, and doubles its special attack if Incineroar ever intimidates it. To make matters worse, normally my plan to beat Dragapult is to use Yanmega and Archaludon, but that's not going to work so well against Porygon 2. This is really hard. After talking it over with my friend Gio, who's also editing this part of the video, hello Gio, I decide to use a new lead: Sneasler and Porygon 2. This exerts offensive pressure against Porygon, Empoleon, Ursaluna, and Rillaboom thanks to Sneasler, and Porygon 2 can set up Trick Room against Dragapult and Blaziken. There are combinations that are really difficult for this lead, but against this weird team that I've never seen before, it at least seems like a decent plan. The game starts with their Porygon 2 and Dragapult against my Sneasler and Porygon 2. Their Porygon gets an attack boost, but mine gets the special attack boost. Dragapult uses Dragon Darts, dealing over half of Sneasler's health, but I retaliate with a close combat against Porygon, dropping it to low HP. Ice Beam almost knocks out Dragapult, and their Porygon 2 uses Terra Blast into Sneasler, but I survive with exactly 1 HP. And that's the difference of the stat points that I put into Sneasler's bulk. Even with the Focus Sash, I've gone down to that double up, but because I had these extra stat points, I was able to survive. They switch Dragapult to Empoleon, taking no damage from Dire Claw, but my Porygon is faster and KOs theirs thanks to the special attack boost. Ursaluna hits the field. They protect both Pokemon in order to get the Flame Orb, and now I have a choice. One of these Pokemon can terrestrialize, but they're they're both weak to close combat. If I call the Terra right, I'll be in good shape. Which Pokemon should I target? I decide to close combat Empoleon. It's Terra Grass, so if it terastallizes, I'll still get some damage on it, unlike Ursaluna, who has the Ghost Terra. The turn starts and my opponent terastallizes Ursaluna. Close combat KOs Empoleon, Ice Beam hits Ursaluna, and Ursaluna KOs Sneasler. I go into Incineroar and they go back into Dragapult, and I finish Dragapult off with Knockoff as Incineroar goes down to Ursaluna. My final Pokemon is my own Ursaluna, and I finish the battle with Ice Beam and Headlong Rush. I stick to the same plan in game 2, but my opponent switches to Dragapult and Rillaboom lead. Not to worry, I have a plan for this. They fake out Sneasler and Dragon Darts, but Dragon Darts crits Sneasler and KOs. That was not part of the plan. Without the crit, I'd have been in totally fine shape, but now things are looking dire. I go into Incineroar and I make a read. Dragapult has got to switch out, so I'll double Rillaboom for the KO. But Dragapult stays in, and I take another Dragon Darts. With Ursaluna now hitting the field for free, I've taken way too much damage and I can no longer win. We're going to game 3. I do have another lead that I can try. It's weak against a Porygon 2 lead, but after how game 1 went, I don't think they're going to try Porygon 2 again. Sneasler and Yanmega. They lead with Dragapult and Empoleon. I protect both my Pokemon as they protect Empoleon and lock into Dragon Dart. Now Empoleon can't protect, and I launch Air Slash into Dragapult, doing over half its health, and close combat to KO Empoleon as Dragon Darts hits both my Pokemon. Porygon 2 comes out and gets a special attack boost, but I ignore it as it terras to fighting and launch a close combat at Dragapult to cover the switch out, and an Air Slash to finish it off. They set up Trick Room and Ursaluna comes in. I'm up 4 against 2, but I have to find a way through the bear. I switch Yanmega to Incineroar as they launch an Ice Beam, but Ursaluna uses Facade into Sneasler, but Ursaluna isn't burnt yet. Sneasler survives and uses close combat on Ursaluna to drop it to low HP. I fake out Ursaluna, who doesn't protect, as Porygon 2 KOs Sneasler, but the damage is done. Their Ursaluna will faint to one more turn of burn. I send out my own Ursaluna and protect, sacrificing Incineroar as their Ursaluna faints to burn. I'm now up 2 against 1. I clean up with Ghost Terra Ursaluna and Yanmega, winning the set and advancing to top 16, which will be played on stream against one of the best players in the US, Alberto Lara. Alberto has a really scary team. Light Clay Auroravale Ninetales, Quiver Dance Volcarona, Choice Scarf Garchomp, and Corviknight. Corviknight's a problem because it has both the moves Bulk Up and Body Press, meaning it makes itself tankier and stronger, and then it can use a fighting type move to hit like half my team for huge damage. It has Roost to shrug off any damage that I do, and its typing matches up super well against Porygon 2, Ursaluna, Sneasler, and Yanmega. Incineroar would normally have a good typing matchup, except that Corviknight's ability Mirror Armor reflects any stat drops back at the launcher, including Incineroar's Intimidate. My only way of beating this Corviknight is Archaludon, who admittedly can KO it in a single hit as long as they don't terastallize. So my entire game plan revolves around using Archaludon to deal with this bird, and that also means protecting it and bringing it in safely. The battle starts with my Sneasler and Yanmega against Alberto's, Ninetales, and Volcarona. I need to break through the other Pokemon on this team in order to force Corviknight in, so I'm just going to go on the offensive. Alberto sets up Auroravale, reducing all of my damage by 1/3 for the next 8 turns, and I fire back a Dire Claw, doing just under half health but getting a poison. Volcarona drops Yanmega to Focus Sash, and Yanmega's Air Slash does just under half to Volcarona. Overall, a pretty even turn. Alberto switches Ninetales to Corviknight, but Yanmega gets a high roll Air Slash and KOs Volcarona, as Sneasler's Dire Claw does nothing to Corviknight. Overall, I'd consider that a pretty good turn for me. Scarf Garchomp hits the field, and I have a choice. On the one hand, I could try and stall out the Auroravale with Protect, but I don't want to let this Corviknight set up for free. The other option is to set Tailwind up and potentially sacrifice both my Pokemon to give Archaludon a free switch in and maximize the turns in Tailwind. Yanmega goes for Tailwind, and Sneasler uses close combat on Garchomp to do just under 50% of its health. Garchomp fires back with Earthquake, KOing Sneasler, and Corviknight KOs Yanmega. I'm now down 2 against 3 as Archaludon and Incineroar hit the field. I'm pretty sure that Garchomp's going to switch to Ninetales here, but I don't want to go all in on it. I decide to hedge my bets. Terra Electric Electroshot will KO Corviknight if it stays in. If it terastallizes, it'll become weak to ground, and therefore Alberto will need to switch out Garchomp. If Corviknight switches, I'll KO Ninetales and remove Garchomp's item, allowing both my Pokemon to outspeed it next turn. It's not a flawless plan, but it should be good enough. Alberto switches Garchomp to Ninetales, Tails, and I terrastalize Archaludon to Electric, but to my surprise, he doesn't terrastalize Corviknight. Electroshot picks up the KO, and Knockoff does almost nothing to Ninetales, as Garchomp comes back in with 2 turns left of Tailwind. Alberto terrastalizes Garchomp to ground, but Archaludon is faster thanks to Tailwind. But Garchomp survives the Dragon Pulse. It goes for an Earthquake, KOing Incineroar and Ninetales. But Archaludon hangs on, and there's still one final turn of Tailwind, Yanmega's parting gift. Archaludon outspeeds Garchomp and KOs it, and I win game 1. But game 2, I have a different plan. Before the match, my friend Yuki told me he really thought that using Ursaluna inside of Trick Room could work. And looking at Alberto's team, I kinda get it. Ursaluna can't touch Corviknight, but if I take out everything else with the bear, I can always finish Corviknight off with Archaludon. Since I'm up a game, I think I'll try it. Alberto's leads are the same, but mine are totally different. Now, I could fake out Ninetales to try and stop the Aurora Veil, but I want to get maximum value out of Trick Room. So I decided to give him the Veil and use Parting Shot to bring Ursaluna in. Alberto doesn't bother setting up a Quiver Dance, and instead it just goes for some damage on Porygon 2, as I get Trick Room up and Ursaluna burnt right away. I'm pretty sure that this Volcarona wants to switch into Corviknight, so I make a preemptive switch. Porygon 2 is faster in Trick Room than Volcarona, meaning it'll switch out first. This means that I can bring Incineroar in before Corviknight hits the field, meaning I won't activate its mirror armor. The turn plays out exactly as I expected. Incineroar switches in, Corviknight switches in, and Ninetales blocks Facade with Protect, meaning now it's vulnerable. I double Ninetales for the KO as Corviknight gets a bulk up off. Volcarona comes back in and Alberto protects it. I attack it with Ursaluna, but I realize his last Pokemon is probably Garchomp, so I want Incineroar off the field. I switch Porygon 2 in, getting the special attack boost thanks to bulk up boosting defense, and Corviknight's Brave Bird does a good bit to Ursaluna. Now though, Volcarona cannot protect again. It does survive the Facade, and Corviknight gets some damage on Porygon 2 in return, but Porygon 2 KOs Volcarona as Trick Room ends, putting my opponent down to his last 2 Pokemon. I switch Porygon 2 out to Incineroar in order to get Intimidate down, and Alberto uses his Terrestrialization on Garchomp. But thanks to the Intimidate, both of my Pokemon survive. Corviknight KOs Incineroar, but Ursaluna uses Facade into Garchomp for most of its health, and even though I lost both my Pokemon, they did what they needed to do. Porygon 2 and Archaludon hit the field. It's now 2 against 2. I Terrestrialize Porygon 2 to Flying, becoming immune to the Earthquake, and Archaludon survives as well. I launch Electroshot into Corviknight, but it barely hangs on. Luckily, thanks to its new Flying typing, Porygon 2 survives the Body Press. I KO Garchomp with Ice Beam, and Alberto forfeits, realizing the set is over. I'm advancing to top 8, where I'll be facing off against a team where we share half of our Pokemon: Incineroar, Porygon 2, and Sneasler. The other 3, Amoonguss, Garchomp, and Goldengo, are scary. Well, okay, the Garchomp should be okay, but the other 2 are scary. I spend some time with Yotam and talking to my friends online, working on a plan. Eventually, I have one that I'm happy with: Yanmega, Incineroar, Porygon 2, and Ursaluna. My opponent's team struggles with ground type attacks, and if I can support Ursaluna well with speed control, I think I can win. The biggest threat is the Goldengo, with Terra Water and Life Orb. And of course, I always have to be on guard against Porygon 2 and Amoonguss. The battle starts with my Incineroar and Yanmega against their Porygon 2 and Sneasler, giving them an attack boost on download. They close combat my Incineroar, but I survive, and I fire back with an Air Slash to drop them to their Focus Sash. Parting Shot lets me bring in Ursaluna safely, but Porygon 2 deals over half to Yanmega with Ice Beam, even with Parting Shot making it weaker. I make a prediction. I ignore Sneasler, Terrestrialize Ursaluna to Ghost, and Porygon 2 switches out as Incineroar comes in. Bug Buzz and Earthquake work together to get the KO. Goldengo comes out, and with Incineroar gone, I decide to switch Ursaluna out to remove the attack drop. My Porygon 2 comes in and gets a special attack boost. I set Tailwind up, sacrificing Yanmega to a Dire Claw Poison as Porygon 2 takes no damage from Shadow Ball. I send Ursaluna back in, now without the attack drop and with Tailwind already up. Goldengo switches to Porygon 2 as Sneasler close combats my Porygon, but I survive. I knock out Sneasler with Porygon, and Facade deals a ton to their Porygon 2, as Goldengo is forced back onto the field. And I see a safe way to win. I recover, and Facade to KO Porygon, as Goldengo uses Make It Rain. Even if Ursaluna had gone down here, I could still win win with Porygon 2 and my low HP Incineroar in the back. I win game 1 with one more Facade. Game 2, my opponent switches to Incineroar and Porygon 2 lead against my Incineroar and Yanmega. I really want to bring Archaludon in safely here so I can get the burn up. I could switch it in for Yanmega, but if I take an Ice Beam, that would be really bad. Alternatively, I could Air Slash Incineroar and Parting Shot Porygon. This way, if I get the flinch, I'll be good, or if they don't use knockoff on Incineroar, then that also works. Unfortunately, things go wrong. There's no flinch, and my opponent went for knockoff into my Incineroar, removing the Flame Orb on the switched in Ursaluna. Turn 2 doesn't go any better. I decide to use Tailwind to try and KO Incineroar before it can move, but my opponent just switches into Amoonguss and goes for Trick Room. A terrible time to set up Tailwind. I switch Yanmega to Incineroar as they switch Porygon 2 into Goldango, but Amoonguss uses Spore on Ursaluna. I predict Amoonguss to switch to Incineroar, and it does, as Goldango terastallizes to water and gets a nasty plot off, but Ursaluna stays asleep. So the headlong rush I used into Incineroar doesn't go off. Ursaluna sleeps for a third turn as Goldango launches a +2 Make It Rain. And now I'm so far behind and I have almost no tools left. This game goes on for a long time longer as I do everything I can, taking out Amoonguss, doubling into Incineroar, calling out Protects. Ultimately, I gamble on my Ursaluna being slower than their Porygon 2. Something that will work always unless their Porygon is intentionally lowering its speed stats. But their Porygon is slower, and I lose my Ursaluna, ultimately costing me the game. It's all down to game 3. I think it over and decide to try an adjustment. Ursaluna and Incineroar. I need Ursaluna to be burnt in order to have it work in this set. They lead with Incineroar and Amoonguss. I need to make sure I don't have a Pokemon put to sleep this turn, so I go for a Fake Out into Incineroar to deny the knockoff, and Protect with Ursaluna. It works, and now my Ursaluna is burnt. I'm a little worried about Headlong Rush lowering my defenses, so I launch a Facade into Incineroar and a Knockoff into Amoonguss as they Parting Shot and bring in Goldango. I try and KO Amoonguss with Flare Blitz, but they switch to Incineroar and use Terra Water Nasty Plot, taking under 50% from the Headlong Rush. I'm forced to switch Ursaluna out into Porygon 2 as they use Make It Rain, doing a ton of damage. And I Parting Shot to bring in Yanmega as they Parting Shot and bring in Amoonguss. I switch Porygon 2 to Incineroar as they Rage Powder my Air Slash away. And Make It Rain drops Yanmega to Focus Sash and does even more damage to Incineroar. My opponent switches both their Pokemon out as I set up Tailwind, trying to sacrifice my Yanmega, and Porygon 2 is revealed to be their final Pokemon. I KO Incineroar with Air Slash and Flare Blitz Porygon 2 again, this time getting a burn, as they set up Trick Room. Both my Pokemon are low HP, but I feel like they're not going to attack this turn. And instead, they're going to try and use Side Pollen Puff and switch in Goldango to heal half of its health. I Parting Shot to bring in Ursaluna and Bug Buzz to deal more damage to Goldango on the switch. Now I'm worried about Pollen Puff healing Goldango and Nasty Plot, as protecting both my Pokemon is somewhat obvious to stall out the last turn of my Tailwind. So I detect Yanmega and use Facade against Goldango. But my opponent doubles into Ursaluna, dropping it to red HP. I do KO Goldango, but now I'm in trouble. Because Yanmega and Ursaluna are on the field and their last Pokemon is Porygon 2, when it switches in, it gets the special attack boost. I switch both my Pokemon out into Incineroar and Porygon 2. They Pollen Puff their Porygon 2 back to full HP and KO my Incineroar on the switch. There's one turn of Trick Room left. I go back into Ursaluna. Protecting Ursaluna is mandatory, but that means that my Porygon 2 falls asleep. This battle will be determined by how quickly my Porygon can wake up. My Ursaluna faints to another burn turn. I want to KO Amoonguss, but I can't risk a Protect. I try and double attack into Porygon 2, but my Porygon stays asleep. Facade leaves their Porygon with just a sliver of HP, but Trick Room goes back up. With just Yanmega and Porygon 2 left, can I even win this? Yes. I need Porygon 2 to wake up this turn. If it does, I can reverse the Trick Room and then KO one of my opponent's Pokemon with a double up thanks to the download special attack boost and the knockoff I used earlier, removing Amoonguss' Citrus Berry. I can do this. Porygon 2 has already slept for 2 turns, meaning its chance of waking up is exactly 50%. This is it. My Porygon stays asleep. I lost the sleep roll. I still have a chance of winning this if I can get a double detect, but I fail. And now down 2 against 1, my Porygon has no chance of winning. I lose the game, the set, and am eliminated from the tournament in the quarterfinals. But I'm not upset. My opponent played really well, and there is no shame in losing to somebody who played better than you. Watching the set back, I can see so many ways that I could have played better. And looking at it another way, this just means that I can still get better, that I haven't reached my peak yet. If you're curious about this specific set, by the way, I posted like, I think it was at least an hour long video on Patreon analyzing every turn of this set to point out exactly where the mistakes were and how I could have been better. And actually, this is one of my favorite things about Pokemon as a competitive game. No matter how much you've played, no matter your accolades, there's always so much you can still learn. I've seen some people online really not saying very kind things about me and my performances lately, so I figured I would just kind of go ahead and address it here. I am proud of this finish. Pokemon is a ridiculously difficult competitive game, and expecting one player to win every tournament, anybody who's played Pokemon competitively knows how ludicrous that is. I personally know that every time I win or even do well at a tournament, it's a big achievement and it's something that I'm proud of. Anyway, I don't feel bad about not winning in a game where winning is this hard. I built a really cool team using a never used monster. I played some good Pokemon, and I learned a lot about how I can still improve and get better. The fact that I earned a good chunk of championship points and some prize money is honestly a bonus. I will at this point be taking a couple months off from tournaments as I am feeling a little bit burnt out, but I'm excited to come back rested early next year and for all the learning that I'm sure that this year will bring. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, you can check out some of my other tournament ones. Hopefully at this point, the Worlds video is out. That's always a video that I mean, that's the video each year that I care the most about, that I put the most time into, my team puts the most time into. So if it's out, then you'll see it on your screen here. And if not, I'll link the Baltimore video, which is another video from this format where I used Weezing and another unused Pokemon, Toedscruel.